Okay, this is Dr. Mitchell again, and the next ergogenic aids we're going to talk about, we're actually going to do two at once here, not because they're the same, they're actually quite different, but there are enough similarities, as you'll see, that we're going to discuss them together, are anabolic steroids and human growth hormone. And the reason I'm going to talk about them together is one, they relate specifically to hormones that our body produces, and so we already know the function of those hormones. We know how testosterone works, we know how growth hormone works, and so not surprisingly, both of these, since they are derivatives of that, will act to have those effects. So understanding how these ergogenic aids work is not very complicated, and in some respect, their effects are fairly similar. So we're going to deal with anabolic steroids first. It's probably the one that's most well known in the world of ergogenic aids and supplements. And there are various forms of anabolic steroids. They have been around as far as their use goes. It's probably as early as the 1950s. That's when we see first evidence of its use, wide ranging in the 60s and 70s. Testing really caught up in the 80s and 90s, but there is still definitely a battle there between testing and being able to mask anabolic steroids and things like that. So when we talk about anabolic steroids, understand we're talking about derivatives or analogs of testosterone. There are other steroids, there's corticosteroids, there's other groups that are not anabolic. In fact, many of them are catabolic. Many, like prednisone, has the opposite effect of anabolic steroids. They decrease muscle mass and cause other issues. So there are a lot of types here. I'm not going to get so much into how they're used, whether it's injection or topical or ingestion or things like that. You can Google some of those things. What I do want you to know is anabolic steroids, they are banned by WADA. They have been for quite a long time. There's extensive testing for them. Having said that, there's still really good evidence that their use, even here in 2020, when you could argue there are probably cleaner performance-enhancing drugs out there, is still somewhat commonplace. And so, again, the way anabolic steroids would work would be the way testosterone would work. And we know with testosterone, we're going to see increases in lean body mass, bone mass, with those, muscle mass, potential force development, things like that. We also will see sexual characteristics related to that, that we would typically see through puberty. And so, again, one of the unique things about anabolic steroids, because testosterone is it's a steroid, it's a lipid hormone, it has the ability to enter into numerous cell types. So unlike other hormones we talk about that's specific to a type of cell, steroids are not. And so we're going to see the effects of it far more extensively in the human body. Now, as far as the research goes, this is probably very similar to what we talked about with other research studies. There is definitely human data on this, though you could argue it's not stellar for various reasons. It's hard to argue, though, that steroids don't work, just simply because it's a derivative of testosterone. There's not great evidence it's going to improve aerobic endurance, and generally improvements we see seem to be more related to improvements in muscle mass and contractility than anything else. So, having said that, not surprisingly, there are numerous side effects, and I could probably take 10 slides to go through all of the known side effects. Now in 2020, there's very good evidence that ties steroids to not only all these things I can list here on your slides, there's even some evidence that is tied to tumor growth in some cancers. And so because of that, it's probably safe to say the use of anabolic steroids, though, still definitely occurs. Because of the side effects, steroids don't have the same glamour, I would say, that they had maybe 20, 30 years ago. And in fact, some of the argument for human growth hormone, which is also banned by WADA, as we'll see in a second, is because it has less of these more systemic side effects. So let's talk about human growth hormone. Human growth hormone, or HGH, has become really well known probably since the late 90s in the baseball era, where this became really popular. Not the only sport, by the way. We saw this in numerous other sports. And again, because this is a derivative, whether it's human or synthetic, of this hormone, we're going to see the same effects we would see of human growth hormone. which is going to be increases in not just muscle mass, bone mass, other connective tissue, things like that. And so, not surprisingly, yes, we are going to see these things, and we will see increase in protein synthesis and other indicators of that. We do generally see some improvements or some increases in utilizing free fatty acids. So with that, there's some decent evidence that we see not only increases in muscle mass, but drops in fat mass because we're utilizing that more. There are effects on blood glucose, and long term there is some concern here, much more with steroids, with effects on blood vessels, atherosclerosis, things like that. Although the data with HGH is not great in the long term, not substantial at least. But again, HGH, there is good research out there, partly because HGH can also be used therapeutically. In some developmental disorders, we see HGH used, and not surprisingly, to very profound effect. So it's fair to say, yes, HGH definitely has its benefits. Again, like steroids, it's banned. Its use is banned by every organization. So this is, again, not one we want to take, but not surprisingly, because of what we see with the hormone, we would see improvements in a lot of indicators here that would potentially improve performance. So, two important ergogenic aids to talk about that increase mass, but also banned by WADA as well. So we'll see you in the next video.